Hi there. Here we are with Chapter 8. I'm not going to waste any time this week talking about lucky numbers because we have a lot to cover in this chapter as we look at cultural and socio-political contexts and what they mean in the language classroom. I will, however, apologize in advance as I am not in my usual room today, so the sound quality might not be that great. Anyway, without further ado, let's begin. My two main objectives for you in this chapter are to understand a little bit more about how language and culture work together, and for you to start to develop an opinion about what it means to be an internationally minded person. Keep these in mind as we go through a summary of the chapter. As you can see, we have quite a few topics to cover. Some of these, however, will be summarized very briefly. First, though, we are going to have a discussion, so let's have a look at that first. We often hear people being referred to as internationally minded people. But what does this mean? Do you think you are an internationally minded person? I'd like to start off with a discussion about what it means to be an internationally minded person. Think of your definition and get ready to share a few examples in class. We start with language and culture. We covered this briefly in Chapter 4, and we'll just have a look at the definition of culture here. There are four main definitions given in our textbook. The big C visible, which refers to arts, history, literature, etc. The big C invisible, which refers to the values and beliefs of the people of that culture. The little c visible, that is gestures, food, and daily customs. And finally, the little c invisible, the opinions and viewpoints of the people. The point at the end of this section, that language and culture work together, is really important, so I suggest you remember that one. We learn in the next section that if we are to understand the complexity of culture, we need to understand two further concepts, discourse and identity. We don't have enough time to get into these two concepts deeply, but very simply, discourse refers to the use of words, either spoken or written, to control the way people think and have them behave in a certain way. Identity, on the other hand, is the way a person acts or speaks in order to portray or show others your position in society. You could say, I guess, that discourse comes from outside and affects the inside of us, whereas identity starts inside us and then goes out, affecting the way others see us. Discourse and identity are not easy to understand, so let's have a quick discussion. Can you find examples of discourse in your daily life? Examples of spoken or written words that are kind of suggesting the way you should live? I'd like you to bring a couple of examples to class. Talking about the identity we try to portray can be a little personal, so we don't need to discuss that in class. However, I would like you to notice what kind of identity you portray to others through, for example, your language, clothing, and actions. We've talked about the differences between ESL and EFL contexts before, so I don't think I need to review it here again. It is good to remember, though, that with the internet becoming more readily available and it becoming easier to travel abroad, the difference between an ESL environment and EFL environment is becoming less clear. So this less clear distinction between ESL environments and EFL environments is a reflection of English in a globalizing world. Just about anywhere you go these days, you will be able to find someone who can speak at least a little English. It has become what is known as a lingua franca, and as a learner of English, it is highly likely that the majority of communication you have in English will be with another non-native speaker. But that shouldn't matter, right? Some people believe they will only learn when they use English with native speakers. But we need to remember that there is no superior form of English, only different forms. It is also highly likely that your teacher will also be a non-native speaker, which brings us on to the next topic, native speakers versus non-native speakers. A lot of people have this idea that native English-speaking teachers, or NESTs, are better than non-native English-speaking teachers, or NNESTs. But it's not necessarily true, of course. There are many, many advantages of being a non-native speaker of English as a language teacher. Non-natives, for example, have experience learning English as a student, so can pass on tips and strategies for learning. Personally, I really like the idea of intercultural competence, as we see on page 167. Yes, language is important, but understanding the perspectives of people from different cultures, becoming what is known as bicultural, is just as, if not more important, than becoming fluent in the target language. I hope you'll aim to become bicultural in your studies as well. It's time for another discussion. The number of schools who have native speakers of English teaching English is increasing. What do you think about their roles? When you think about the 4 skills, reading, writing, listening, and speaking, which do you think might be better taught by native speakers of English and which by non-natives? Have a think about it and make sure you have some reasons and examples to support your opinion. Regardless of where you are, there will be guidelines showing you what your school, the community, and the government expects you to teach in your classrooms. It is beneficial for you, of course, to be aware of the guidelines given by MEXT here in Japan, so you can have a clearer image of what you are supposed to be teaching. Although they are probably more relevant for ESL environments, having an understanding of the differences between BICS, that is, skills to be able to communicate with another person, and CALP, referring to more academic language, will help you understand the level of language you should be aiming for your students to achieve. Make sure you are familiar with these 2 terms, as we will come back to them later in the course. There's a lot of information here about different institutional contexts. But I think most of it is really not that important for us just now. It's interesting for you to be aware of the different kinds of academic institutions, so make sure you read about them, especially submersion and immersion on page 171, and EAP and ESP on page 174. But as for the others, you don't have to worry about them too much just yet. Well, that's all we have time for today. Here's a reminder of the goals for this chapter. What do you think? Have you achieved these goals? Be sure to skim over the book a couple of more times before class, and I'll see you soon.